Welcome to Logitique. I'm your host, Dr. Raymond Chang. Now, is China playing Cupid between Ukraine and Russia? Now, just a few days ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after more than 14 months of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. China said that the talks were to promote peace and promised to send an envoy to have a talk with each party involved in the conflict. Now, according to Financial Times, the person chosen is Li Hui, a veteran diplomat and former ambassador to Moscow, who is currently special representative of the Chinese government on Eurasian affairs. Now, according to an official Chinese statement from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Li will engage in in-depth communication with all parties on the political settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. Now, Zelensky, upon being asked, said that the China-Ukraine talk was long and meaningful. The Ukrainian president further elaborated on his Twitter account, saying, "I believe that this call, as well as the appointment of Ukraine's ambassador to China, will give a powerful impetus to the development of our bilateral relations." The call was welcomed by the US, the EU, now of course France and Germany. Even Russia said that they would welcome any moves that could soon end the conflict. But strange enough, though, just 2 days after they all looked so friendly and seemed to be so open to peace talks, the Ukrainian president said that the Russian soldiers were all responsible for war crimes. Now, he said on Saturday, "Not only the commanders, but all of you, you're all terrorists and murderers, and all of you must be punished." Now, why did he say that? The comments follow a missile strike on the city of Uman that killed 23 people on Friday. And among them, according to Zelensky, were 6 minors. And that's why he got so angry. So, is this ever going to end, or is this never going to end? Did Russia not say that they welcomed the peace talks? Now, were they not a friend of China? Now, at least China is not a foe. So why would President Putin have ordered the strike when you know a friend of yours, which is China, of course, is working on the peace talks? This week, we'll find out. Now, we said we're going to talk about as to why President Putin is still attacking Ukraine. But before that, let's take a look at what the U.S. is saying. Now, according to the White House, they believe that it might be too soon to determine whether Chinese call can really lead to a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Now, and Washington's caution is even shared by some of the Chinese experts who think that the call fails to offer anything new in regards of China's stance on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Now, independent Chinese analyst in Beijing, Wu Qiang, said that on one hand, the call was an old-fashioned conversation centering around the friendship between China and Ukraine, and it failed to offer any concrete peace proposals to the ongoing conflict. And he further explained it also didn't condemn the Russian invasion. All of China's political positions reflected through the call remain the same. Now, while China continues to try and highlight its neutrality in the Ukraine war, global analysts and some of the world leaders remain really skeptical about Beijing's real intention. Skeptical! Well, it really should be noted that China's intentions are always constantly being questioned, whereas America's political motives are always glorified. Now, according to Wang Wen, the dean of the Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies at Renmin University in Beijing and a prominent pro-government scholar, said Chinese President Xi Jinping's call gives significant pushback against rumors that China is pro-Russia and is benefiting from the conflict. Now, China is a peacemaker, not a troublemaker. Now, indeed, some of the Chinese scholars later confirmed that the call to Zelensky was scheduled actually weeks before, so it wasn't actually sudden. So put it the other way around, both sides had thought through their own issues well before they decided to pick up the phone and talk. So just as some other Chinese scholars who also pointed out that China had to take time and deliberate over the position in the war and not blindly follow the West. Now, if you happen to not know, the Chinese-Ukrainian relationship was actually closed before the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So both Russia and Ukraine were good friends of China. Now, and as everybody knows, China purchased a hull from Ukraine in 1998, and which later became the country's first aircraft carrier. Now, how bad a relationship could it possibly be when you can even buy an aircraft carrier from a country? Now, this hull hence became a clear mark of the Ukrainian-Chinese long-standing friendship, as it becomes particularly difficult for the Chinese to meddle into this, if you call that meddling. Now, despite all this, China continues to be questioned by the West. So everybody actually needs to be objective about the situation. It really takes time to self-study and find out the true facts. Now, in an interview with the German media DW News, Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda cast doubt on China's credibility as a mediator, emphasizing that condemnation of Russia's invasion has to be the precondition for Beijing to become a real mediator, meaning that in order to facilitate the progression of peace, Beijing has to first condemn the so-called Russian invasion. Now, this would, however, fail China's attempt at neutrality. Now you see the problem here. Now try to think of China's role as the work of a marital mediator. Both Russia and Ukraine are your high school friends. Russia is that best buddy of yours whose own men went gang fight with your dad. And Ukraine is a longtime friend of yours whom you have borrowed the notes to study for an exam. And now you're caught in between the divorce. Now, so do you start mediating by saying, hey, you Russia, you have to admit that you screwed her and punch her in the face, punch her in the eye in the first place, or else I will start intervening in you guys' dispute. Now, you don't say that at all. You sit down, calm everybody down, and start the mediation by asking them to talk gently, calmly, and reasonably. And what's more, you ask them to please just put everything aside for a while, right? Now, how could China even start by first condemning Russia of its so-called invasion? Go ask any mediator out there. And this is never the right way to start any mediation. This is only the definite way to fail a mediation. Now look again how the other people are interpreting this logic. News reports are saying that since last February, China has been building a no-limits partnership with Russia by deepening bilateral ties on multiple fronts. Wait, these ties were actually initiated way before the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Did they even check the timing? Now, another said, even though China stops short of offering Russia military support, Beijing has also not condemned Russia's invasion of characterized the conflict as a war. Okay, the same issue from my marital mediator analogy. Now, and then another one saying, despite China's attempt to frame itself as a peacemaker by putting forward a 12-point peace plan in February, the world's leaders still expect more, and they believe its lack of action to pressure Russia creates serious doubt as its true position in the conflict. Oh my, are they not learning? I mean, the very same issue from my marital mediator analogy again. And this mentality is spreading everywhere, despite the lingering skepticism towards China's credibility as a mediator. One former Ukrainian diplomat, Alexander Sherba, who's the former Ukrainian ambassador to Austria, said it is in all parties' interests if China maintains an ambiguous position regarding the war, as it will be damaging for Ukraine and catastrophic for the world if China aligns itself with the occupier who is not winning the war. Okay, they're talking about Russia, right? Now, in simpler terms, Sherba wanted to say that it is best if China stays neutral. And that word neutral actually means, hey, stay out of this. And everybody should be happy with the amount of China's contribution until now. He further added, I think it would be logical and prudent of China to be ambiguous about this. Okay, in other words, shoo, we don't want your help. Right? Now, EU has voiced a stance on the matter as well. The first reaction was to applaud the decision, but then felt conflicted due to all of the other European countries' skepticism. Now, EU seems to be struggling with being unbiased when it comes to China. Now, while the EU and several European countries welcome the Chinese president's call with Zelensky, with the German government describing it as a good signal, Anna Ferensky, an academic from the National Donghua University in Taiwan, believes that the EU still faces a dilemma of how to deal with China at a time when there's skepticism among European countries. Now, she told DW that there is a dilemma regarding how to go forward with China. And she continued by saying, I think the EU needs to maintain a clear and tough stance vis-a-vis Russia and China, and the EU needs to condemn any lack of actions. Oh, lack of actions again. So she also said, in a very ironical way, was speaking of peace, she accused China's intention if Europe doesn't drive the peace process along the fundamental elements that are in line with the international norms, again, international norms, including the respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, China would drive it along its agenda. Okay, now I get it. So going back to my marital mediator analogy, everybody wants to pick sides for obvious ideological reasons. Well, I can relate to that. Why? Because if you've ever seen a man hitting a woman on the street, chances are that everybody would say, hey, stop the man, and accuse him of hurting the woman. But on the other hand, if you see a woman hitting a man on the street, you might think that the man must have done something wrong to the woman. And in both cases, people would tend to help the weaker one. So look at Russia and Ukraine. Who looks weaker to you? Now, and also, the whole scenario just doesn't make sense at all. Why? Check the timing. Now, we all know that Ukraine is running low on its ammunition. Now, they needed the United States to provide them with this and that, tanks and fighter jets, etc., and launching a counteroffense now seems to be such a strange thing, particularly when you are running low on all of these. Now, this sounds like a suicide plan, isn't it? Now, Russia knows that. Look at what they've been saying. Now, once again, according to DW, the Kremlin said that they need to finish or achieve the goals of a special military operation in Ukraine. So why now? Why set this right after China spelled out her 12-point plan? I mean, the peace plan. Remember the World Cup 2022 in Qatar just last year? Did you remember reading any Russian, Ukrainian news during the times when we were all wondering whether it was going to be Argentina or France to get into the finals? Now, people are very selective when it comes to news. And mind you, the 19th Asian Games 2022, yes, 2022, not 2023, because it was postponed from last year. And this is going to be held in the city of Hangzhou from September 23rd to October 8th. This year, 2023. So do you honestly think people in China, or maybe even people in Asia would be interested in any further Russian, Ukrainian news during that period? Or if you were that marital mediator who has just achieved, should be brokered that jaw-dropping deal restoring full diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, you might want to make sure that this new deal between Russia and Ukraine won't happen during the Asian Games. But after that, what does that mean? It's more or less like, Mom is not around and we still have time to play. So all of a sudden, both Russia and Ukraine want to make sure that they achieve the best scenarios when it comes to really sitting down and start negotiating. Or you can call that the darkest hour before dawn. Now that explains why Ukraine, even knowing that they're running out of ammo quickly, will still want to start counterstrike. And also, do you know the next Ukrainian presidential election is going to be held, per the Constitution of Ukraine, on the last Sunday of March, on the 5th year of the incumbent president's term of office, which is spring 2024. So when is that going to be? That is March 31st, latest, 2024. What does that mean? If you still remember, during the 2019 Ukrainian presidential election, President Zelensky said clearly that he was running for only one term. 2 years later, May 2021, Zelensky said that it was too early to say whether he will run for a second term. So, see, he's thinking to run again. Now, according to the same news report, Zelensky's decision would depend on the attitude to him in society. Of course, that means his approval ratings, right? And would also be influenced by his family. Really that simple? No. I say that would depend on whether Joe Biden, is still going to be around and how much he could still receive from the United States and the EU in helping him to prolong that conflict. And by the way, one thing you need to know as well, while we are all hearing about those conflicts these days in Ukraine almost never publicly claims responsibility for attacks inside Russia and on Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine. But they're doing it now. So why is that only now they're saying this? Think about it. So until then, ciao.
Before you leave, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with your friends. See you in the next episode.